Hope all are well. Again, we have again, apologies. I was stuck in a meeting, a large meeting. Um, we have a different system now for those that are asking. I'm just going to repeat it. I think most of you are already aware of this, that for each of the classes we do, we ask people to register. First of all, that's how we can keep track easier of who's participating when we need to make reports when those things happen. But also, so we don't send out too much email to the entire list. So if you sign up for a class, you'll get the text for that class that day or the day before or whenever. Usually it's not before the day before. And also, there should be on that email, and I don't always check them myself, but there should be links to all the previous classes that are recorded now, as you can see. And that way, people that have to miss because of a doctor's appointment or whatever it might be, can catch up and feel part of the group. It's working. That's a model we used with the I don't remember when we first used it. I think with the ACT group, and I know that people are very appreciative that they can be part of that. I know it's a little bit more complicated for those that expect just to see the text in the weekly e-blast, and because the class is on Wednesday, both those two emails come on Tuesday. So we try to space them out a few hours so that people can differentiate, but maybe look at it that way. And if there's further problems, let us know, and we'll try to refine the system. Okay, we've got a difficult chapter ahead of us for two reasons. One is the realia, what this brings up. In so many ways, and I want to hear from people what they think of course, but also from a textual point of view, as a number of our chapters have been. In this case, there's two kinds of criticisms. I like to throw in from time to time methodological issues, and I want Malka to feel like she's back at JTS, learning all the tools of study. But we talk in biblical studies of higher criticism and lower criticism. What does that mean? Let's start with lower criticism. That's easy. Lower criticism is we have the biblical text in front of us in Hebrew, the Masoretic text, the MT, which is you have in the Hebrew on the sheets ahead of you, which is what appears in a Torah scroll minus the vowels, which appears in all the Jewish Bibles that we have. It's more or less based on the same text. It's called the text. Now, there's another Hebrew text that we have access to, what's famous are the Dead Sea. Three Dead Sea Scrolls that have the same biblical text in it, and they're written differently. For instance, the letters, the words are spelled a little bit differently. Sometimes not in a spelling that may change to me. Sometimes the meaning is changed. So there is no thing as the authoritative text of the Hebrew Bible. There are a number of texts, but we usually go, as Jews, we go by the Masoretic text. Now, when you have a text which is corrupt, which looks to us as funny, the words, we had a great example of that last week. We've had a number of those. 2-3 weeks ago, we had what Koifman called, a grossly damaged text. And then we fix the text, we amend the text. We say it really should read this way because we based it on logic, we based it on ancient other readings, like what kind of Hebrew text was in front of the translator of the Septuagint 2,300 years ago, the Old Latin, whatever or the Dead Sea Scrolls, maybe even another manuscript of a Hebrew manuscript, another close manuscript of the Masoretic text that we use. All those things are lower criticism. Lower criticism when you fix the actual letters, the wording of the text. Higher criticism is when we say, oh, there are a number of authors at work here. The typical examples of higher criticism in the Torah are dividing the sources between J, the one who uses Adonai, E, the one who uses Elohim in the stories of Genesis mostly, but not just, the priestly source, and D, P is the priestly source, and D, which is Deuteronomy. And then when we get to the books that we're reading now that we did a few years ago, Judges and Joshua, higher criticism is to say, well, there were earlier sources, earlier stories that were then edited together by a Deuteronomic or Deuteronomistic editor, DTR, we call that. Now, all that is higher criticism. When I talk about two traditions that have been interwoven together, that's what we would call higher criticism. And the same things are applied to New Testament studies. And I think also all this comes from originally from Greek text in the 19th century when people started to say Homeric texts, it doesn't seem to be from the same author. All right. So now we have a really interesting example today. There may be a few of lower criticism, less so, but of higher criticism, which is yeah, we'll see. You know, two things like, whoa, what's going on here? Why are there two stories that are interwoven in a poem? Um, and I'll try to continue to use the term. Not that it's that important to know the term higher criticism, lower criticism, but it is important to know, for instance, what packs a more powerful punch. If you say that a few letters got scrambled in the text, that's one thing. But if you say, from a traditional point of view, from an Orthodox point of view, if you say, no, the whole Torah got scrambled and it re-scrambled and re-edited hundreds of years after it, you know, it reported to happen. Well, that could threaten those that come from a traditional background. Doesn't threaten me. Perhaps it did the first semester of my studies, Hebrew University in 1982, but I got over that in the second semester. Okay. Questions or comments before we go on? We're having fun though, right? This is fun. All right. Part of this is not going to be fun today because it's a little violent. Okay. All right then. So Malka, would you do the honors and start us off with 1 to 4?
When King Adonizedek of Jerusalem learned that Joshua had captured Ai and proscribed it, treating Ai and its kings as he had treated Jericho and its king, and that moreover the inhabitants of Gibeon had come to terms with Israel and remained among them, he was very frightened. For Gibeon was a large city, like one of the royal cities, in fact, larger than Ai, and all its men were warriors. So King Adonizedek of Jerusalem sent this message to King Hoham of Hebron, King Piram of Jarmuth, King Yaphia of Lachish, and King Debir of Eglon. Come up and help me defeat Gibeon, for it has come to terms with Joshua and the Israelites.
Okay, you get first whack at it, Malka. Any comments?
No.
You gotta love the name King Hoham. I love it. Hoham. Okay, perhaps it's just a natural thing that happens. This is geopolitics here, right? They find out something's going on. They say, if it could happen to them, it certainly is going to happen to us. And so let's build an alliance, right? Let's get the EU involved and some of the Gulf states to bomb the Houthis, to the Houthis who were doing that to United States because of the war in Gaza. There's this kind of tug and pull going on, which has always been part from the moment human beings started to, I would imagine, collect themselves into groups and teams and families and clans. I'm guessing this has been at work, certainly amongst the men, and it brings back the story. In that we see that the Gibeonite, the story of the Givonim that we read about, how they tricked Joshua and the people into making a pact with them, and hence that's why the Gibeonites, at the time of the writing of this, hundreds of years after it purported to happen, they're still amongst the people. Why are they still here? They're Canaanites. Well, that's the explanation. Well, brings them back into the story to show that perhaps that made things more complicated, because we were looking forward. Quote, we're looking forward. I don't mean to see, but from the author's point of view, from the editor's point of view, to okay, we got past, we conquered Jericho. Now we're going to conquer the Ai. Oh, that went wrong for that. We fixed that. Now we're going to go forward. And then the Gibeonites get it. There seems to be a fly in the ointment. Is that the expression? There seems to be something going. There seems to be a problem that gets in the way every time to moving ahead quickly. And the problem here, the challenge here, is that there's a gathering together of allies to fight against them. Makes perfect sense, right?
It reminds me of the story of King Melchizedek of Jerusalem.
So in what way?
Just the opposite. Well,
Right,
he made a pact with Avram, right? And here it seems like King Adonizedek of Jerusalem is actually working against the Israelites.
right. So that I think probably, if I had to take a stand back, I would imagine you've got those two because it's the same place. It's Yerushalayim, Yerushalayim, and that's documented in extra biblical sources. Tel Amarna, the documents there. The word the name Ushalem, I think it is, appears, and so it's a city long before it became the capital of David's United Kingdom of the tribes. And it's also connected with the Yevusim, the Jebusites. There seems to be interchangeable, so the same place. But Tzedek is the name of their god, their god. And so Adoni Tzedek is my Lord, Adoni, right? My Lord is Tzedek. And Malki Tzedek, who's the guy who Abraham hooks up with in a very positive sense, as Malka pointed out. That's Tzedek is my king. So those are theophoric names, right? Names that have God in them, or the name of a God in them. And it seems to be this, maybe this reflects, Malcolm, this is total speculation, maybe this reflects this kind of mixed experience that the Israelites had with that city over the centuries. There was the story that represents the good contact, that where he opened up his arms and actually taught Abraham how to pray, almost, right? Taught him how to give homage, but levarech. And then here, the getting together of bringing together the enemies. Yeah. So other names that stand out here. It's good to, right? Who, you see any other names that are familiar? Place names, especially.
Eglon, that comes up a lot. The
So
king of
yeah, Eglon, but interesting, Eglon that we're familiar with mostly is the name of the king of Moab, right? But
Hebron.
Lachish, the documents, Lachish documents we have from Tel Lachish. There's the well-known archaeological stuff. Where you said something, Dan?
Hebron.
Yeah, Hebron. So these are all places that were existed before. I guess I have to go back and say, and reflecting in today's reality again, over 100 days now, and I feel the need and the obligation to remind ourselves that when we study, we're studying to uplift ourselves, to not just to distract, but also to distract ourselves from the sadness of this horrible war and the situation there and other places in the world, but also that uplift ourselves into being able to see things perhaps a little bit more objective, less I can't think of a good word, less parochial, maybe we could say, than we often do, or many of us did growing up. The land was not empty. It wasn't an empty slate for the Israelites to move into and to just build their cities and just make the desert bloom. No, it was inhabited, and texts emphasize that time after time. And the eye, and Jericho was cursed that it should never be rebuilt. Malka, you asked that question. I think, was it ever rebuilt over the years? But many of them became holy spaces. Hebron, Yerushalayim, these are holy cities. Another thing about the geographical aspect of this is a wide swath. This kind of includes these cities branch out into most of the land of Judah, of the tribe of Judah, and Dan, and Benjamin. Right, this is a big section of representatives. So it's not just a group of city states that were in a particular area. This is a wide swath of the land. Anything else? Okay, Klaus, you want to do us 5-7? Just need you to unmute first.
Yeah.
There you go. Thanks.
The 5 Amorite kings, the king of Jerusalem, the king of Hebron, the king of Yarmut, the king of Lachish, and the king of Eglon, with all their armies, joined forces and marched on Gibeon, and encamped against it and attacked it. The people of Gibeon thereupon sent this message to Joshua in the camp of Gilgal: Do not fail your servants. Come quickly and aid us and deliver us, for all the Amorite kings of the hill country have gathered against us. So Joshua marched up from Gilgal with all his combat troops, all the trained warriors.
Okay. You may notice that Gilgal is the place that they always go back to, right? If you haven't noticed that yet, and we're going to see that throughout this chapter as well. Is this expected? Is it surprising? What, you've got an action, a react.
I'm just wondering why Joshua felt compelled to defend Gibeon. I know that they had made a pact with them, but they weren't like they were the Ger that were in like the stranger that lives among you, because they made them hewers of wood and drawers of water. So why did he feel compelled to defend them?
Yeah, I don't know. It'd be interesting to see, and I didn't check, the over centuries of especially rabbinic and medieval interpretation. What occurred to me right away was that was part of the pact, even though the pact wasn't detailed in the pact, but that was the understanding of the pact, that you're under our protection. We won't do anything to you. It's not just we won't actively do anything to you. We won't passively do anything to you by not getting up and defending you. Klaus, did you want to say something?
Yeah, I was wondering, we're talking so much about cities. Did each king rule a city, or did he have land around it too?
Yeah, so these are city-states, fortress kind, walled cities with land around them. Sure, that's how they supplied themselves with food.
So it's not necessarily a huge area.
Well, the area of the fields would have gone out more, but I don't know to tell you how many square
Yeah.
kilometers it would be.
Okay.
If you look up Lachish, or we have mounds in many of these places. Lachish is maybe the famous one. It's always kind of surprising at how small it is from our point of view, right? Especially so it's kind of like I don't know what it's like. Blythe. No, it's not like Blythe. It's even smaller.
And these cities must be huge.
Well, no, they're actually not so big. I think that when they talk about tens of thousands, that's hyperbole. The most you hear really is the thousands, and I think I think it's maybe hundreds of people in reality, hundreds or maybe thousands, but I don't really know. Not much. Yeah, people have written a lot about this stuff. It just never drew but interesting question, of course. Yeah.
So the Gibeonites were not considered like Ger resident aliens, or they were?
So Malcolm, you're going back to Torah law, as if that's in the background of all this. And I would say from a higher criticism point of view, we wouldn't assume that. What we have in the laws of the Torah, the way it's laid out in the code of Deuteronomy, say, okay, is even after these stories were told, certainly after the stories happened or purported to happen, but maybe even after the stories were told. So there's not always a link with, very often, there's not a link with the law the way we know it. Now, that's why I said it would be interesting to see what rabbinic commentary and medieval Jewish commentary would say, because in their world, in traditional rabbis, those things they've got to match up, right? How could it be? How could Joshua not have kept the law of Deuteronomy kind of thing? But we don't necessarily assume that. And I guess though, but in spirit, I guess we could say that, yeah, they kept the spirit of that. But why didn't the coalition go up against the Israelites directly to Gilgal? Yeah, I don't know. I mean, it leaves the door open to, there's another trap being set here. Right?
Because the Gibeonites were one of them and Joshua was not. Maybe that's why they went up against them first, because traditionally they would have been fighting, Gibeon would have been fighting on their side, but they made that pact. They tricked Joshua so that they could be protected. So maybe that's why they attacked them first. They were traitors, so to speak.
Right. And that's a tricky one also, because who said that all those those 5 kings came together now, but who said they didn't fight each other before that, right? I don't know, but it leaves the door open for some surprise. It doesn't happen that way, but again, I couldn't help but reflect on why are the Houthis sending missiles to British tank or to Cypriot-owned tankers going through? Like, who does what to whom in order to identify with another side to side up? In every global war situation, there always seems to be these strange bedfellows, or maybe not so strange bedfellows. Yeah. Any other reactions or comments? Okay. So 8 to 11, Megan, please.
God said to Joshua, "Do not be afraid of them, for I will deliver them into your hands. Not one of them shall withstand you." Joshua took them by surprise, marching all night from Gilgal. God threw them into a panic before Israel. Joshua inflicted a crushing defeat on them at Gibeon, pursued them in the direction of the Beth Horon ascent, harried them all the way to Ascah and Makkedah. While they were fleeing before Israel down the descent from Beth Horon, God hurled huge stones on them from the sky all the way to Ascah, and they perished. More perished from the hailstones than were killed by the Israelite weapons.
Okay, so problem solved, right? First of all, this gives us the answer to, from a literary point of view, at least from the plot point of view, why was it important for the 5 kings to lay siege and attack the Gibeonites? Because their attention was faced on of Givon. It was attention. So therefore, it made it easier from the story point of view, from the narrative point of view, for the Joshua to go all night and attack them while their attention is still there. So I thought, well, is this another trap going to be laid here? No. In the end, it worked exactly against them for whatever their reasons were. But from the narrative's point of view, it makes it more plausible that Joshua and his troops were able to, get them from, surprise attack. And then now who gets credit here for the victory?
Hashem.
So God gets credit in actually 2 ways. One way, of course, the most obvious way, are the stones, the hailstones or the huge stones. We'll have to talk about those things. In the hailstones or the huge stones, we'll get to that in a second, coming down from the sky. But also, before that, right? And harried them all the way, a crushing defeat on them, harried them all the way. Also Joshua and his troops get credit. But God works in 2 ways here. And we're going to see God works possibly in 2/3 ways. In other words, God works through human beings, the victory, and that's something we have in the Torah stories as well, right? God, if Moses has his hands up, kind of a thing, that they're going to win the war. If God is with them, they'll win the war. If God is not, they won't win the war in natural ways. But in supernatural ways, this is one supernatural way, and we're going to see there was another possibility of a supernatural way as well in just a few minutes, in a minute or two. So to give you an idea, again, the Azekah and Makkedah, I know the only map I have is in Kaufman's commentary, but it's in Hebrew. I didn't have the strength to maybe I could take a picture. I don't know. I can't really. It's not big enough for me to do here. I should have taken a picture beforehand with a cursor, maybe. But basically to show the area. What I'm always struck with, there's place names in Israel are often named after biblical names, and often the name, even the biblical name, was preserved in the Arabic name. So for instance, Givon, the Givonites, is thought to be where the Arabic named village of El Jib, Jib as in Givon, Jib. And sometimes I don't know what the Arabic name was beforehand, but the name of a particular community is in a place where this happened, or at least the narrator wants to say it happened. And the place I'm thinking of now is Beit Choron. Beit Choron is on the hillside. If you can imagine driving from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem, and you get to the place where the hills start, just where, at the foothills, Beit Choron is on the left-hand side. At least the community name called Beit Choron and Mevo Choron, those places there. So apparently there was in that place a field of very large stones. And you ask yourself, when there's very large stones, as one of our daughters asked us when we went camping once, someplace in the Sequoia, in the riverbed, there was a huge boulder, and she says, Debbie, who many of you met, she says, Abba, mi samet even azot sham, Abba, who put that rock there? Who put that boulder there? And she answers her own questions by Hashem. Did God put it there? She was pretty little. I don't how old was she, Sasha? She was very little. 3 or 4, yeah. Anyway, it was a trip with Abigail, I think. So she had to be, 3. In any case, there was a place of stone. So many people understand this as a story that comes to explain a field of meteorites. Is that the word for stones that are there places in the world that have little stones that are lots of little stones strewn that are known to be broken meteor? Help me out, folks. Dan, you know this kind of stuff.
Well, I know of places where there are large craters and evidence of things from space. The Sodom and Gomorrah story is evidence of a big a meteor that hit the area in biblical times.
Are you sure you want to say evidence or perhaps based upon?
Corroborate, well, not evidence, but
I know what you mean.
The nature of the land was such that it gave a base for the story.
Right.
Yeah, this is something that came from heaven and rained destruction.
Right. And this is the same kind of story that's connected to that, of course, right? So it's understood as in one place it says, sorry, I need my glasses for the Hebrew. Yeah, I'm sorry the Hebrew is so small, the font, but it's the only way I can get it on 3 as opposed to 4 pages. This is a long one. So it says, Vadonahi shlich aleim avanim gdolot, great stones, min hashamayim, from the heavens. And then in the continuations, Asher metu ba'avnei habarad, the ones who died from the hailstones. So it says great stones, but also says hailstones. Now, hailstones, as I've mentioned to some of you before, I have a memory of saying this, when we lived in the Gaza Strip, and there was not once but twice a hailstorm that literally, when people say as big as golf balls, it was the hailstones were, I don't know if there was larger golf balls, but they tore apart. We had these plastic tunnels to grow. We were growing flowers in that these kind of temporary hothouse effect, and it's not thin. It was pretty thick plastic. What do you call it? Yeah, but you know what I mean. Sheer and they were torn up by this hailstorm. So I think many of you have experienced that kind of. It can get pretty violent. So now, does it kill people? I don't know. I don't know if it kills people, but we understand though that it seems to be 2 variations of the same theme: stones from heaven. One more of a meteorite kind of a thing, or debris from heaven. How and why they knew about that, I don't know exactly. Maybe it's just a repetition of the theme from an earlier tradition about Sodom and Gomorrah. And the other one is something they did know about, some pretty big hailstones. And which is also explains. Oh, by the way, the hail though often ruins crops. That we saw even when we didn't have we had we grew bell peppers, and if a hailstone would touch, even a small one would hit a bell pepper, that's it. because it's a dent. You can't market the fruit anymore. And so what I'm trying to say is there's hyperbole side of this, and there's the nature-based side of this. But all along, though, it says at the end it says at the end it says, you know, that's besides those that were killed by the sword. So 2/3 types of death, or 2 types of death with variation of how the more miraculous deaths happened. Comments or questions?
Also, it starts out with God threw them into a panic before Israel. And when a group is in a panic, they don't function as well.
Good, yeah, absolutely, good point. There's a
So,
story of
Started out,
yeah, there's a story in the book of Kings as well, where the enemy was thrown into panic as well, and they all fled. Right, so there was no war because they all fled. Yeah. Okay, should we go on? Now we see, so even the miraculous side is even a little bit more complicated. It's not just a choice between 2 types of stones from heaven, whether hailstones or meteorite stones, but also something else. And also what happens here, from an interesting point of view, it moves from narrative prose to poetry. Okay, so Rita Claire, you want to read the next section?
Sure. On that occasion, when God routed the Amorites from the Israelites, Joshua addressed God. He said in the presence of the Israelites, "Stand still, O sun, at Gibeon, O moon in the valley of Ajalon." And the sun stood still, and the moon halted, while a nation wreaked judgment on its foes, as is written in the book of Joshua. Thus the sun halted in mid-heaven and did not press on to set for a whole day, for God fought for Israel. Neither before nor since has there ever been a day when God acted on words spoken by someone else.
Okay, and if you didn't understand what just happened, that's all right. The text is challenging in a number.
Yes.
Let's
yes.
start to pick it apart. What do we understand?
That God went to help them.
Right, so another miraculous victory.
Yes.
And how was this one done? What's the supernatural aspect of this?
Well, he used the sun and the moon.
So, and what do they do though? How does God use the sun and the moon?
Well, he made the sun stand still, and he didn't let the moon rise.
Yeah, but except this is a big problem.
Yes.
Go ahead.
Yeah, well, if this happened, if the sun stopped, it means the Earth has stopped moving, and if the Earth stopped moving, we'd lose our gravitational element, and everything would fly off the Earth into the space.
All I can say is that it's a good thing that 2,800 years ago, or whenever it was that this was written, that Richard wasn't there to totally pop the balloon of the storyteller. Right? You're such a party pooper, Richard.
I know, but this passage right here is a big problem, because there are a lot of people who, oh, God can do this.
Yeah.
I suppose God could change the laws of physics, but it would have. That's what would have to happen.
But isn't that the definition of supernatural, Richard?
No, I don't. Not for me, it isn't.
So
for me, supernatural is something that is unexplainable, an occurrence that you see that we can't explain, but actually occurs. But it's supernatural because we don't know how it occurs.
Okay.
The kind of way, and how does anesthesia work, for example, is supernatural because it works, but no one knows how it works. And but this, it's known that if the Earth didn't, gravity is understood. The Earth can't stop moving. If it stopped moving, there'd be no gravity.
Okay. So if we are able to suspend for a moment or two, suspend our knowledge of the laws of physics, and to say that, okay, if God can also make the water stand in a wall on one side and the other
Mhm.
side, etc., all those kind of things. We suspend that a second. Let's say that is the case. Do we still really understand what happened here?
I think what Joshua is really praying for and say, right before in 8 through 11, there was a huge storm and stones. So I think when he says sun stand still and moon stand still, he's asking God not to let the situation change. Let the hailstorm continue, let the stones continue until we can finish up the job.
Okay, so Malka, you're a harmonist, right? You like harmony. That's a harmonistic approach to biblical. In other words, you're
Mhm.
right and you're right. So if I was to come and say there seem to be 2/3 totally different understanding of what the miracle was that how God got actively involved in this battle. One was hailstones. That's more natural. One was meteorites. That's a little bit stretching it for the ancient mind, right? Okay. And one was to have the sun stops at its place in the sky for however long, doesn't stipulate. All these, I would say they all represent different traditions, but Malka comes, like many do, and says, no, they all serve the same, at least from the narrative point of view. The editor's point of view, they serve the same goal of how God got involved. All right, so that it's not one is right, one's wrong, different kinds of approaches. And it's interesting when we read biblical commentaries, rabbinic commentaries, there are those that do that more than others. The one who is probably, I would say, in my mind, most famous for the harmonistic approach of Nevi'im and Ketuvim, of prophets and the writings part of the Tanakh, is the Malbim, especially the Nevi'im. Malbim, who lived in the 19th century, Meir Lavush, something, don't remember, didn't prepare, sorry, but Malbim's commentary and it was important for me when I was in yeshiva, when I was buying books, to buy a Mikraot Gedolot, a rabbinic Bible of prophets and writings that had Malbim's commentary in it, because it was just so easy. It made it all clear. And that's how I came to Hebrew University in 1982, equipped with that kind of library at home. And the only paper, and this I know I've shared with you before because it's the only time it ever happened. The only paper that I wrote at university that got 100, because we get number grades there. 100 was the one that I wrote when we were asked to compare one story from Kings with a different rendition of it in Chronicles, and how Julius Wellhausen and his school, how they interpreted that it was two different. That's higher criticism. And I wrote that part of the paper. I did exactly what I was supposed to do. I explained what he does. This wasn't a seminar paper. This is an exercise. And then I said, that is one way of looking at this situation. However, there's another one personified, exemplified by Malbim, whatever. And I wrote another page that explained how he, in a very harmonistic way, said, no, it's really the same kind of a story. It's just more detailed. And Rivka Shraga, who I'm still friends with, or I'm friends with on Facebook, she was the TA, and she gave me 100. She says, I have never seen such a third from a totally secular background, because I don't think there were very few yeshiva guys that went to the Bible department in those years. In fact, there were none really. Afterwards, many went. And I combined those two approaches until some point I realized that that's not the approach for me. Okay, all that to say that it feels like there's three things. People use this phrase in Hebrew a lot. A lot of people know. Ella would have said something if she was here. She for sure. Shemesh begivon dom, right? Yeah, Shemesh begivon dom. May the sun stand still. And I think Richard was talking about is probably from the Christian world, where people talk about this a lot. I had not understood until you read it, Rita, because Rita Claire, when I read, because I know the Hebrew, Aijalon, I read A alone, right? I alone, because that's the Hebrew. But you read Ajalon or Ajalon, and now I understand why the church is called the Church of Ajalon. I never clicked. The church in North Palm Springs. And why would they call it church? Because that is that's a wonderful example of a miracle where God causes the sun to stand still in the sky. What does that accomplish? How does that win the battle? So Malka said it wins the battle in a way because it allows the hailstorm, whatever's happening, the stones from heaven to continue to kill all the enemy. It seems to me, though, if we look at this poem on its own, it implies that we're back to Joshua and his soldiers running after the enemy, and it gives them enough time, enough daylight to finish the job. That's how I think that's how it's often understood.
I have a question. I kind of question whether this was when it was written so long ago that they use these phrases to make an impression without the knowledge of how gravity and how the world really works. So I don't know, am I explaining?
Well,
what I'm
I
trying
didn't
to
hear
say?
the question yet. I heard the premise
well,
of the question, but I didn't hear the question.
Probably wasn't a question. It was probably my understanding of this is that they used these words to make an impression upon the people that God was so powerful that he was able to do this without saying how believable could this be when we know that, like Richard said, that this could not happen without disastrous things happening. So is that why they wrote it this way? Because we didn't have any knowledge of
So you can't say they wrote it this way because they knew they didn't have the knowledge. That doesn't work from a logical point of view, right? But that's why the story did work. Ancient stories work when they talk about, let's just talk about the Hebrew Bible, when it talks about what God, and for that matter, New Testament, right? When ancient literature works in a way, it's not so much is it believable from a scientific point of view. That's a modern tendency. That's our tendency to do that. But the story it works in a general sense because there's nothing glaringly say that cannot happen. But of course, Zakovich would say, no, that's exactly the point. It cannot happen. I can't make the sun stand still. They knew that the sun goes from here to there every day, right? That's clear. You know that. Do they know about the gravitational pull? No, but even if they did know, that would be exactly what Zakovich says. That's the point of the story, to show it goes against all laws of nature because God is the one who governs nature. Yes, Eric, and then Klaus.
And this is exactly what I was thinking, that if God can stop the sun, then God also has the power to keep you from falling off the earth. Everything follows, this logical progression of, God can do that. And, just exactly what you said. So why isn't it believable?
That's my Eric. That's like my answer to those that there are those in the ultra Orthodox world that oppose organ donation. Especially after death, right, or life or death. And one of the things you hear is because if you donate your kidney, to another person or whatever, or your cornea or whatever it is, then when it comes time for the resurrection of the dead, which is a traditional Jewish belief, then you won't have all the parts of your body. My answer to that is, if God can resurrect you from the dead, God can find those parts of the body and bring them back to you as well.
It also, isn't it your soul that's being resurrected primarily?
That would be a modern interpretation of it, but
Okay.
the ancient interpretation is no, actually it's this.
Okay.
Yeah. Yes, Klaus, and then Dan.
I was thinking of it in terms of an eclipse. If you had that, you would get those kind of darkness, and for some reason, if the eclipse lasted, everything else would go on as you would expect. You still have gravity and everything else. It would be another phenomenon, but some people always look for somewhat logical explanations, and I'm afraid I'm one of them, but I also realize there is no logical explanation. But I was thinking about eclipses when we talked.
Great. And that's exactly where many modern commentators went, exactly to that. And maybe even pre-modern, in other words. So then you say, well, what's miraculous about that? That happens after so many years. Although I did hear yesterday on an NPR story about an astronomer that the moon is pulling away from us. It's no time near, but in the next few million years or whatever it is, where so the commenter said, yes, there won't be they won't be able to have a lunar eclipse, and it'll mess with the tides, I'm guessing, as well. But yeah, that's what people often say. So let me frame it this way, Klaus. What people would say is, in the same way that there's a violent hailstorm with very large pieces of ice that are ruining the crop and maybe whatever that seem to be life-threatening because it's so it's terror, what's going the same way that gives birth to a larger story here too. The first eclipse that people accept, whoa, what's going on? Can you imagine what would the first full lunar eclipse, if people in the first time, there's a great story by Isaac Asimov. I don't even know if I have that book anymore. It was a brilliant story about how the civilization was in panic because they were losing light, and they were sure that their son had died. The sun was dying, and going, what are they going to do? Whatever. And it's a very detailed description. And the last line of the story is, I realize I'm killing it for anybody who's going to read it. I think maybe it's called One Day. The story is that, and that's and something like, and this was the first sundown in that civilization, something like that. The first time the sun went down. It's brilliant the way it's written. And there's a story like that amongst Adam as well, right? We talk about the origins of Hanukkah based on the Roman pagan holidays of Calendar or the other one that's at that time. And the Talmud talks about how Adam saw the days were getting shorter. If Adam was created in Rosh Hashanah and the days are getting shorter, and he says, well, this must be punishment because of the eating from the fruit. And then and he starts to fast and pray. And then comes December 22nd, and he realizes, or December 23rd, he says, oh, it's getting better. And he says, this must be the way of the world. But he threw a party of Thanksgiving. And then the Talmud says, and while Adam did it for the sake of heaven, the Shem Shemayim, these other schmucks, they made a religion out of it. And hence we have that holiday, those holidays of light, which both Hanukkah and Christmas are based upon. Okay, but back to this. Dan, you wanted to say something.
Yeah, two things. Looking at the last verse in this section, it looks like the remarkable thing is not that the sun stood still, but that God acted on words spoken by someone else.
Right. Joshua had that power. Yeah. Good point. Really good point. So many things in here, right? And is this part of the story? Where did this come from? And do you need this if you got the hailstorms? If you don't, unless you go with Malka's approach. And then the other point here is all this is written about in a totally different book that we don't have. And don't tell me, we do have Sefer Yashar. There are actually two books that I know in Jewish literary tradition called Sefer Yashar. One is Kabbalistic, which I have but it's medieval. And the other one is a little bit earlier. My guess it's probably from that time when there were that kind of genre was flourishing in the 10th, 11th century, which is more of a biblical paraphrase, from the genre of biblical paraphrase. You can find it easily for those of you that use Sefaria, and I think we did it once. We could do it another time. It's just an amazing tool. Sasha always says to me, like, where did you come? How did you get to that text from Rav Soloveitchik? Because she knows I don't read Rav Soloveitchik. Hello, Sefaria. That's how it's mentioned. If a verse is mentioned, then I'll put it. So Sefaria will give you the biblical text in the middle, and then you go to Midrash. And Sefer Yashar is always in all the narrative stuff. You always can go to Sefer Yashar, an English version, and so it's there. But that's all this is based on. But that's a really interesting aspect of. We don't have too many references in the Hebrew Bible. We have some to other books. Another one is Divrei Amim Shel Malchei Yisrael, something like the Chronicles of the Kings of Israel, as it is written. And here's as written the book of Yashar. So. It's cool that the narrator here gives us his footnotes, so to speak.
Edward Greenstein wrote a good article, one of my favorite, about the book of Yashar, about what it actually, well, we know it was a book of poetry, and he shows proof about what it actually was.
Uh-huh.
and a book of poetry and some of the things that were contained within it.
Great, thank you, thank you. And if you have to, if it's online, you want to send that in the chat, that's fine. Or send it.
I probably have it in my library. I can
Okay.
send it to you. Mhm.
Yeah, Ed Greenstein is a wonderful, wonderful man, wonderful scholar.
He oversaw my dissertation at JTS. He is.
A true mensch, a real fine man. Yeah, he moved to Israel with his wife. We had contact with his wife because she was a well-known educator. Maybe she still is in Jerusalem, and that's how I met him through my now contact with her. Okay, wow. So I guess we're not going to get, but this is, I mean, such a rich chapter, and we're only 2/3 through. We're only 1/3 through it. So let's see. Let's see if we can get down to at least to 27 today, and we'll finish the first unit of this chapter, the first literary unit, which is we're still on this war and the Givon and the Makeda and all this place. So let's go ahead. Sue Spicer, you want to read?
Sure.
Is
Then
Sue-
John, he's just came back from workout. He's tired.
Oh, okay. All right. Go ahead. We're in 15 to 9, people. Top of the second page.
Then Joshua, together with all Israel, returned to the camp at Gilgal. Meanwhile, those 5 kings fled and hid it in a cave at Makeda. When it was reported to Joshua that the 5 kings had been found hiding in a cave at Makeda, Joshua ordered, roll large stones up against the mouth of the cave and post some men over it to keep guard over them. But as for the rest of you, don't stop, but press on the heels of your enemies and harass them from the rear. Don't let them reach their towns, for the Eternal, your God, has delivered them into your hands.
Okay. Comments or reactions? All right, I have a very difficult comment to make here, and I had not seen this until now. I have to say I'd never seen this before, but of course I haven't really taught Joshua, so, but I'm going to show you a passage, a very famous passage from what's known, should be able to see it on the screen, what's known as Parshat Zachor. It's what we read not only in the Torah portion in the late summer when this comes around, but we read it for the Shabbat before Purim, where we take out in the traditional synagogue 2 Torah scrolls, and one is in Deuteronomy, one is open to Deuteronomy, the other one is opened earlier on, wherever the Parsha is. And this is Parshat Zachor. Dan, I know you know it well, so why don't you read it for us?
Remember Amalek did what Amalek did to you on your journey after you left Egypt. How undeterred by fear of God, he surprised you on the march when you were famished and weary, and cut down all the stragglers in your rear. Therefore, when the Eternal your God grants you safety from all your enemies around you, in the land that the Eternal your God is giving you as a hereditary portion, you shall blot out the memory of Amalek from under heaven. Do not forget.
Okay, I'm going to keep this up for a second, but I'm going to say a few words. The Amalek is the enemy par excellence. I think everybody here knows, but probably you know Amalek is the enemy we love to hate. Amalek is we'll just say it, Hamas. Hamas is the Amalek. It was Saddam, it was Yasser Arafat, it was Saddam Hussein. It's always whoever in many circles, not in all circles. Okay, so Amalek are, the quintessential enemy, who are the enemy for the sake of being the enemy. They just are the enemy, except for over the generations, people said, yeah, but what's so wrong with them? What is so bad with them? And this is the text that people go to, the middle verse, right? That when they were undeterred by the fear of God, but that's of course all the enemies didn't know Adonai. But what do? V'izanev. This word right here. I can't. It's not letting me. Ugh, I don't know why it won't. But anyway, what do? Va'izaneh, from the word tail, from the end. They surprised you on the march. That's not they usually it's understood as they attacked the the latter part of the people marching who were the stragglers, right? That's why this translation is mixed up a number of things together. Cut down all the stragglers in your rear. That's what Vayizanev is. And that's exactly the word that we have in our text today. Vayizanev, if you look at the word for harass them from the rear, you'll see in the last line, Radfu achrei oivechem, v'zanavtem otam. And you do the same thing. In other words, you do exactly the thing that the Amalekites are accused of doing, which is considered to be immoral. That's right? They should fight soldier to soldier, not the women and the children, the elderly at the end. I didn't find any commentary on this. It's interesting. I'm sure not. I just haven't looked hard enough yet. But Koifman doesn't mention this at all, and the traditional commentaries, I didn't find anything. I need to look further because there's a double standard here, a double standard, and this is what I want to say. I think maybe we're going to end with this today. I find a huge double standard on all sides, right? Or judging, is double standard. Why is Israel always isolated for what they're doing in, as opposed to other countries, other nations, whatever it might be. But a double standard that we employ as well. We expect certain things from other people that we don't ourselves do. And when I say we, I mean we as a people. And members of the current government in Israel, or certain rabbis here in the United States, or other leaders, say things that are horrendous, that give themselves permission to say it because of the history, 20th century history of the Jewish people, of anti-Semitism. They allow themselves to say it, but they have a totally different standard when other people say things that are very similar. What I'm trying to say is that it makes sense in the context here, and it makes sense in the context there. But we have to be aware of the fact that we got to be really careful. We have to be very, very careful in what we call out. And if we do call out something, we say, and when people, yeah, but how about your side? I say, well, my side's also. When people say, when I talk about the anti-Semitism on the right wing in the United States, and they say, yeah, what the left, there too. Okay, I'm not. Let's go to both of them. But right now, I happen to be talking about the people that that at the demonstration in Charleston, or whatever I happen to be talking about. Or right now, I'm talking about the people, the guy who walked out when I spoke the other day in Martin Luther King event at the Baptist Church, and I talked about how we have to have compassion and hear the cries of suffering and comfort. The scriptural reading on Monday at that service was Nachamu Nachamu Ami from Isaiah 40. Comfort. God says comfort. God says comfort to the people. That we all need to we need to look to Martin Luther King to remind us each year. The previous speaker, Reverend Dan, my good friend, talked about the call for activism. That's great, but we also need to have a call for comfort, for compassion, for comfort. And I mentioned people of Gaza, as I mentioned as Israeli, the Jewish people, and a guy with a kafia got up and walked out. No idea who he was. Nobody seemed to know who he was. And okay, that's all right. But we need to mention both things in the same breath, which is why I'm so careful about it, I think. Okay. I can't, it's not fair for me to just say that and then leave it up in the air. Does somebody else want to add something, or? Okay, then we're going to pick up here at, and we stopped to talk about the king and put, so we're going to pick up on the top of the second page next week at 15 to 19. That's where we'll start. So it means that we'll send out the same text next week, just for those that are coming on this week, but don't go ahead and print it. All right. Check you have it. Yes, Dan.
Any interference with the Torah trek next week?
No, Torah trek's in the morning, and then
In the afternoon.
excuse me, the class is in the morning.
afternoon.
Torah trek is in the afternoon.
Okay, so we're done here at 12 and 1. Okay, got it.
So Malka, you're coming, right?
I didn't realize when I read it that you could do it on Zoom. I thought it was only in
Oh, no,
person.
no, I was joking. Yeah, I don't think. we can-
I said I was gonna be happy if I could do it on Zoom.
You know what? If I have time to go beforehand and see if it'll work, then we'll try to do so. I hadn't thought of that. That is actually a good idea. It all depends if there's reception there in Big Morongo in the rain. There might be, because it's right next to a town, so a little town. Not a city state, Klaus, a town, a little town, Morongo.
I mean, I have to miss the Texans and the Ravens game? I'm playing.
I wouldn't know.
That's not on Wednesday.
Okay, Serena, it's good to have you with us, and Teresa, it's good to have everybody with us. Give Sid an energy bar and tell him there's a whole day ahead of him. Okay.
But can I make a request? I don't know if it's possible.
Go
When
ahead.
I love the sheets that you give out. Can you make the Hebrew font a little bit bigger? For
Yeah,
me, and I guess Maya, it's hard to read.
yeah. So I will. It's my need to try to put it on two sides, three to save paper. That's why. But
Okay.
I'll take that into consideration. I will
I
try
don't
to.
mind more sheets. Just
Yeah, okay. And the other thing
Yeah.
is, if you see that sheet, if you send it to me, if you just send me a note, then I'll fix one up for you right away with more sheets.
Okay, that would
Yeah,
be great. Thank you. I'll let you.
I'll just do it, or yeah. I don't want to send out the Word documents because that with people with different machines, the Hebrew and the English gets messed up. Okay?
Okay,
All right, everybody. Thanks
thank you.
For a good class.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye. Bye, everyone.
Thanks, Magdalena.